Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is G. Cole, and welcome to Homegrown, where I get to share with you some good music while talking to some great people. Hello world, I hope you're feeling as good as I am. I want to big up all my homegrown listeners out there and welcome all the new listeners. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do so we can keep you updated when new material is available. We will be posting new episodes bi-weekly. This is episode 18.
All my days! Seems like they have been wasted, eh? Bueno! Just goes on to show. Till I'm laid to rest, yes, always be depressed. There's no life in the West. I know the East is the best. All the propaganda that spread, tongues will have to confess. Oh, I'm in bondage, living is a mess, and I've got to rise up, alleviate the stress. No longer will I expose my weakness. Ego's acknowledge begins with humbleness. Work 7 to 7, yet me still penniless. For the food up on me table, master, God bless. All of the needy and shelterless. Ethiopia await all prince and princess. Till I'm laid to rest, yes, always be depressed. There's no life in the West. I know the East is the best, yes, propaganda then spread, tongues will have to confess. What could a man about the East? Everybody want a piece. Africa free Africans, Marcus Mosiah speak. Unification out under the feet. What a day when we walking down Redemption Street. Man up on head, Bible in a hand, one and all. Make we try the promised land. Would you go down a Congo, stop in a Shashamane land? The city of Ferraris where Selassie come from. In Addis Ababa then Botswana. Left Kenya, I end up in a Ghana. Oh, what a beauty my eyesight behold. Holy Ethiopia, protect me from the cold. Till I'm laid to rest, yes, always be depressed. There's no life in the West. I know the East is the best. All the propaganda then spread, tongues will have to confess. Organize and centralize, come as one. Overseas shall be so many more than sand. Some new one replenish, pure and clean and for too long we've been.
Yes, and that one is Till Shiloh, the album, and the song is called Till I'm Laid to Rest from Buju Banton. Today we're talking criminal and juvenile law. Most people hope that the only time they'll need an attorney is to negotiate some great settlement or a nice contract, but unfortunately that is not so. Some people have criminal careers. Some have, some are career criminals. Some make stupid mistakes. And then there are the 3 people who are actually innocent. Either way, at some point in time, we need the expert to not only translate the complicated language of the law, but help protect us from the firm hand that it can lay down. So today, we're going to be speaking with criminal defense attorney Jamie McClendon, who also specializes in juvenile justice. Jamie, welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, first of all, for taking time out today to talk with us. It's a lot of wonderful information out there that people need to hear, and I'm so grateful that you're willing to share your time. So thanks again for that.
I appreciate being able to share whatever information I can.
Now, I'm going to start with this. I'm yet to ever hear anyone straight up say I'm guilty of a crime. And even when the evidence is abundant, they still proclaim innocence. The question is, as an attorney, you're there to ensure that your client's given due process and afforded a fair trial. But to an attorney, does it really matter if the person's innocent or guilty?
I guess, the easy answer is no. My job doesn't change whether they're guilty or innocent. I think there's a difference in desperation. If you truly believe that your client just didn't do this, trying to prove that to a prosecutor or to a judge or a jury, there's this, more of an emotional sense to it. Mm-hmm. But for my job, it's basically the same. I mean, it's getting them through this process that I think a lot of people are afraid of and don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't change whether or not I believe they're guilty or innocent.
I got you. And prior to talking with you, I was, talking to my team, and they, as we do the research, sometimes they come up with these questions. Some of them just ask this. And I'm like one of them, do you ever find yourself in a position where you're just like, man, I'm sorry, dude, I can't help you. You're on your own.
Actually, no. I think I kind of found my little niche of taking the cases in which the client is like no one wants him or no one wants to handle him.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not even that I don't have patience. It's
Right.
more that I think when they see me fighting back with them and trying to like get them to understand where the court's coming from or the prosecutor's coming from, that passion that I have for the work that I do kind of gets to them. And some of my clients have said, my goodness, if you're going to be like this with me, in the courtroom, that has to transfer. So there really isn't. I mean, all I can do is explain to them based on my experience, based on, working with this judge or this prosecutor or, different type of cases, what my opinion is. And it's an educated opinion, but I can't guarantee them anything. So they get to make the final decision. If they want to fight this all the way to the end, I'm there. Even if it's my advice would be, oh my gosh, we're going to go down really, really fast.
Right.
It's still, as long as they understand that, I'm willing to do whatever they need me to do to fight their case.
Right. And questions like those come up because no matter how scary it may seem, it's scary when you have to ever go to court. I've only had to go in court to support somebody. It's a scary thing. But on the outside, there's a little bit of intrigue. So people have all these questions. There's all these things on TV, stuff like that. So everybody has some questions. Is it really like that? I can't wait to get the CSI detective in the studio, but that's a whole different thing. I mean, most questions that I come across in conversation, they revolve around the whole concept of misdemeanors versus felonies, because primarily of the effect it has on somebody obtaining employment or maintaining employment for that matter. For those who don't know, can you briefly explain the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony?
And obviously every state's different on their penalties, and not only their penalties within the court system, but like their collateral penalties. So like if they're getting any kind of government aid or even federal aid, it can impact it differently. For the most part, misdemeanors don't have a necessary impact on someone's employment. So a lot of employers would prefer you not to have any criminal records, but a misdemeanor doesn't just categorically keep you from a particular career. Usually felony charges, especially if you want to get into healthcare or if you want to get scholarships or, any kind of government aid, that usually can impact a person by just eliminating the possibility altogether, that they don't really look beyond maybe the incidents of what happened and they just see you've been convicted of a felony and that's it. On the short term, kind of technically, I guess short term, it can affect some of your rights. In Wisconsin, a person cannot vote in any election until their civil rights are restored. So that usually means at the end of their sentence, the Department of Corrections sends them a piece of paper saying, you've completed this, now you may vote in an election. You can never, at least again in the state of Wisconsin and a lot of other states too, you can never possess a firearm if you've been convicted of a felony. So there's impacts that go outside of just, jail and prison and probation that can have long-term goals. And as a defense attorney, especially if I get a client that's either already in the health-related field, they want to do nursing or CA or working with children, their goal is to get them at least a misdemeanor so that they can continue with their career. Otherwise, for most professions, that's just a big strike and they're not going to be able to continue to work.
Gotcha. So I guess, loosely translated, it's not so much the infraction, but pretty much the outcome, which,
yeah.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah. And the same is true for the military. The military might actually look at the police reports and say, hey, based on our rules, even though you resolved this in a misdemeanor, we would consider this to be a higher, crime, and then you would not be able to join the military either. So it really kind of depends on the agency, but usually felonies, that cancels out a lot of things.
Gotcha. All right, and then another thing I always hear everyone talking about is pretty much the concept of the public defender. From the information I've gathered, I think most attorneys have spent some time practicing as a public defender, but there's a stigma attached that if you better find that money and get a good attorney, because if you have a public defender, you're screwed. Let's do this plea bargain. Let's do this. You know what I mean? Is there any truth to that?
Okay, so this is how I describe the difference between hiring a privately retained attorney and working with a public defender. So I was at the public defender's office for over 5 years, and that's just as an attorney. I've worked in some capacity at a public defender's office now for 15 years as law clerks, interns, a bunch of other things. So the difference that I think between a public defender and a privately retained attorney is that one is like triage. So when you go to the emergency room, they're a lot faster, but they know what they're doing. They just have to process you a lot faster, and the result is still the same. You've gotten the same care, it's just faster.
Gotcha.
A privately retained attorney, I kind of view this more as like you went to your primary physician, you scheduled this appointment with them, they have the time to sit there and kind of make you feel better about the situation instead of just like stapling the wound shut.
I gotcha.
So
I gotcha.
To me, the public defender's office and the attorneys there, you just become experts in what you're doing because you've done whatever it is that the privately retained attorney has done for you that day. They've done it at least 10 times. So it's like the volume of work is different, obviously, but this is what we decided to be experts in, is the criminal justice system. And for me, I was in front of the same judges more than any other attorney that came into that courtroom because that's where I am. And I got to know the judge and the DAs better than anybody else. And so a lot of times, especially if it's an attorney that doesn't usually practice in that particular area, they'll search out for the public defender's office because they know that person is there all the time and ask you, like, hey, what does the CA usually do on this type of case? What does the judge think of, these certain treatment programs? You kind of become the expert in the courtroom because that's where you are all the time. And you do have that volume. Obviously, there's the setback of, sometimes I have clients, especially if they're new to the system, that need more of a hand-holding, walk you through kind of like nurturing. And I just don't have that personality, so I'm just the wrong person for that anyways. But there's that feeling of, okay, I know you want me to hold your hand, but really I need to go in there and do battle. So if you're looking for a hand holder, you might want to pay someone to do that.
Right,
Because it's either not in someone's DNA, like me, or we just don't have the time if you're working in an office like that. But to me, the result is still the same. It's just how it goes, as you go down the road. Now that I'm a private attorney, I still take a lot of public defender cases, and I'm probably, too big of a defender of saying, hey, you have an attorney from the public defender's office, you're fine. You don't need me, you'll be great. But I think people need to just view that attorney, whether it's privately retained or the public defender's office, based on the individual. I mean, I see lazy private bar attorneys, and everyone knows it, just as much as I would see them in the public defender's office. That person's going to be lazy wherever you place them. So It's not the office, it's the individual. That's really how that kind of goes. And I think people need to ask more questions when they're talking to their attorneys about that. I
gotcha. I like the analogy about the doctors. It just kind of seems that the emergency room is not right next to the morgue, so kind of, they end up there anyway. That's how we feel,
Right?
Oh, my Lord. All right, I'm going to run into some other questions with you. Don't go anywhere. Keep it moving. Keep it grooving. It's Homegrown.
Watch
kitchen I burn them without apology. No, cause I get to realize it's a strategy to keep the poor and happy. The downtrodden shall not be forgotten, neither humiliated anymore. Shall not be forgotten, neither humiliated no more. Me and the youths are revolute because we hungry for the truth, and the leaders still refuse to do what they ought to do. Instigate and abuse when they out to diffuse the problem them we're piling up on I and you. And then they seem shocked by the things we choose to do, as if we ain't supposed to be offended by your moves. But the lion attitude reflect that of the multitude. Epitomize the youths with the mental aptitude to realize the folly and the cunning that you do, to keep the youth believing that them ordained to love. We burnt every white flag we own, changing the conversation's tone. Watch this story unfold. Crying out for justice, all the youths from crying out for justice. Only the wicked would oppose us. The youths from crying out for justice. Don't you hear them crying out for justice? The youths from crying out for justice. Only the wicked would oppose us. The youths from crying out for justice. We need liberation to build a firm foundation, real communication. That is the only way to change the situation. Liberation to build a firm foundation, real communication. That is the only way to change the situation. We burnt every white flag we own, changing the conversation.
And that one is Justice by Jesse Royal from the album Lily of the Valley. Wicked, 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 wicked album. Here's another one for you. The unfortunate thing in this day and age is that people will call 911 for any and everything. They get upset. Something simple ends up into somebody going to jail, and by morning, regretfully or not, somebody's life can change. The question is, can one, after having a change of heart, say, oops, my bad, I'm dropping the charges, please let him or her go? Or does the state take over once that arrest is made?
My clients tell me that all the time. You need to speak to so-and-so because they're going to drop the charges on me. And the honest answer is, as soon as someone has called the police, it isn't up to them anymore. And they can come and they can talk to that police officer, or they can talk to like the victim witness kind of coordinators that some offices have. They can talk to the prosecutor and say, hey, my bad, I think I overreacted, or it didn't happen the way that I said that it did. I was just overreacting, whatever. And the problem is that it just isn't up to them anymore. Some prosecutors will say, well, okay, and this happens a lot in domestic cases where all of a sudden now everyone's calmed down, and it sounds sexist, but it's usually the female that calls on the male. But if the person says it didn't happen that way,
right?
A prosecutor and the defense attorney have to look and say, well, there's some pictures that then need some explaining. Like there's more. There's more than your statement. We took pictures, and there's a 911 tape, and you can hear the person yelling in the background. Right. That's where the problem comes in. Is that a lot of people think, well, they don't have any evidence on me. If that person recants, they don't have any evidence, and it's like, but they do. Right. And whatever their statement was in the beginning, we can investigate and see. And the reverse has happened though too, where I have a client who's charged with a battery. I get the pictures and I'm like, there's nothing here.
Right.
This officer is saying that this victim got scratched, and I'm looking at a scar, like it's not fresh. So it happens in reverse too, where it's quite true that this didn't happen the way that everyone said it did. But you got to look at more than just the words. And that's where I think people kind of hope that just by recanting or saying, hey, I'm not interested in pursuing this anymore, that case will go away. Usually it does not.
Gotcha. Now, when it comes to, okay, so you've gotten arrested, stuff's on your record. Right, wrong, or indifferent. You just weren't able to prove your innocence or convince somebody of the innocence that only you believe. How difficult is it to get a record expunged after being arrested for, let's say, a misdemeanor?
Again, every state's different.
Mm-hmm.
In Wisconsin, as long as you're 24 and younger, most offenses, whether they're misdemeanors or felonies, have the opportunity of being expunged. There's some exceptions that are obviously like the very violent crimes or sex assault crimes that are just never going to be eligible. But they want to think that someone who is younger and just hasn't learned might have the chance of redeeming themselves.
Right.
So let's give them another chance. But beyond that, it's extremely hard. And now what's really the bigger problem is the internet. You know, before an employer would have to go and like send a request to the court to get documents, to get them, you know, it's a process.
Right.
Now people can just Google. So like even if your record, so the court record is gone, police reports don't disappear. You know, if there's any kind of like local newspaper article, that doesn't disappear. It's still, people can find it.
Mugshots.
So so weirdly enough, like even if the court, their paperwork has gone away, and so they don't have that conviction anymore, just doing a Google search, you can find it still. And that's what's been a little bit harder.
I gotcha. Yeah, I could see that. I could see that because, you know, for different things, you know, hiring a babysitter, your line of work is putting people to work, HR, recruiting, whatever the case may be. You lean on Google a lot, and you know, you don't want to say people are passing judgment, but a lot of people are paid to pass judgment. So, you know, it's, you know, you pull stuff up and you're absolutely right. Everything is there. And here's a crazy thing. Sometimes the court doesn't have to put it up there. The sheriff's department doesn't have to put it up there. People go ahead and put stuff on their Facebook pages.
Yeah.
So,
and they do that more often now. Police departments have their own pages. So, and most of them don't really list names, but it doesn't mean that it isn't easy to find in other ways.
Right. Wow. Oh boy. And I know that laws do vary from state to state, sometimes county to county, especially with things like gun laws and, you know, how political that topic is right now. We also have the cloud of the police and the community. It's a very sensitive subject these days, but from a legal standpoint, why do you think it's so difficult for people to get any favorable verdict in cases against the police?
Whenever I have a client that has a case where it's literally just his word or her word versus a police officer, I tell them, you know, we might be able to dress you up in a suit and get your hair done nice and, you know, make you presentable, whether you're in or out of custody, great. But you're not going to come in with a shiny badge and the full, you know, sometimes officers wear the full uniform. So they have like the vest that says police or whatever department that they're in. And you know what I mean? So I think there's this like need, and rightfully so, that when a police officer is doing their job, that they're honest and they're doing a good job, because we should, because they are in a position of power, hold them to a higher standard. The problem is that I think then people forget that just like any other career or just like any other person, they're still a person. So they are just as likely to get something wrong, because if their eyes don't suddenly get magical, their memory doesn't suddenly become crystal clear, they're under like either a high stress situation or something that's going really fast, you know, they're not writing a report until at least hours later, you know.
Right.
So I think that's been the hardest thing to overcome, is that, you know, having to show that just because they have that badge, just because you're holding them up in a higher regard, doesn't make them any less human. And having to recall something, especially if your adrenaline's going, especially if it's dark, if it's going really fast, any human being would have difficulties recalling everything.
Right.
And so that's what's really hard. And once they put it in a police report, getting them to change their mind from the report is like impossible. I mean, you could have the trial years later. The only thing that they're relying on is their police report, right? I mean, by that time, they don't remember. They've had how many different arrests and how many different, you know, different engagements with people that they're relying on the report. So it's really hard to get sometimes a jury to understand that we're not trying to make the police officers awful human beings. We're just trying to get you to understand that they are human and they have the same tendencies. And the idea that you can't trust the police. You know, I have to deal with a community in which, you know, parents are having to tell their kids to run.
Right.
And I grew up in a community where you'd have nothing to be afraid of the police officer. If you're in trouble, you go to them, not the other way around.
Right.
And so that is like a whole different aspect that, you know, even living in a community where the population is majority white, but my clients and the jail and the people who come through on arrest are predominantly not.
Right.
Their juries are white. So having to explain to a jury that the reactions for my client are going to be different than your reaction just because of just their experiences, that sometimes just doesn't translate. So when we see, you know, police officers who quote unquote get off, even though we've seen the video and we're like, what is happening right now? I don't think people want to believe that they're prone to mistakes,
right?
You know, or that they can have not evil, but they can do bad things too. And that it's even though, you know, we're always trying to say like, not all black people,
right?
You know, the same goes for not all police officers are upstanding citizens. And that's
true.
really hard for people. That's really hard for people to want to accept.
That's true.
That's true. Yeah.
No, it's so true. It's so true. And the concept, you know, is alive. You know, a good guy in a badge is a good guy in a badge. A bad guy in a badge is a bad guy in a badge. You know, but at the end of the day, the human factor is a human factor, and they are human beings. Well, we are talking criminal law. When we come back, we're going to chat on some juvenile law. Keep it moving, keep it grooving. It's homegrown.
Rastafari rules. You know, say we have to talk the truth, nah. Love a splash pandey. Love is gonna save the day. Royal sounds. I know that love is gonna save the day. I know that love is gonna save the day. I know that love is gonna save the day. I know. Yes, inna the streets, yo, the youths in a struggle. Don't tell them already, please, no cause no trouble, yeah. Don't fling no stone and no fling no buckle. Come on, head that get pop like bubble, yeah. Come on, a Rasta youth. The black cat, the berry, yo, the sweet of the juice, yes. How you feel grow if you're not no roots. Love is the answer, so please don't shoot. I know that love is gonna save the day. I know that love is gonna save the day. I know that love is gonna save the day. I know. Up your third eye and you will see that love is something that we need to be to influence the youth them consciously and about the fall bad company. But when all the judgment strike on them, run up and down and afraid from when. Forget all yourself and forget your children. Love is the answer, no need to pretend.
And that one is called Love by Royal Sounds. The album is called Burning Inspiration. Big bad band from out of the UK. Check them out. All right. Question for you. We're gonna roll over to the juvenile side of the coin now. You know, it's. I think it's a more delicate side. From the standpoint of you're dealing with, in some cases, minors. You know, and I guess sometimes there's even the question people don't understand: what's the difference between a minor and a juvenile?
Right.
You know, but you're dealing with something delicate here. It's like mom, it's like grandma, it's like kids. Once you hear the word, you know, so it's a total different thing. As well as I'm sure the laws are different and the approach and so forth. So something that seems to be coming up in conversation a lot recently is emancipation. Children who are not in the best of domestic situations and they try to seek emancipation from their parents. And I know you do a lot of criminal law. Of course, juvenile is another avenue of expertise of yours. Do you come across that a lot where children are seeking emancipation for one reason or another?
No, not so much anymore. I mean, I think there was, and this is probably before I was practicing as an attorney, I think there was kind of a lot of kids searching that for various reasons. And I don't know if it's all just because of the family life, but a lot of it had to do with working, that they wanted to, because there's certain jobs you just can't do, and you can't, and I know too, like with the military, there's certain things that you can't do without parents' permission until you reach a certain age. Right. But not so much anymore. I do think that there isn't, the laws, even though they're still on the books, one, it's very, very difficult, and there's this need to still want to protect kids, that it just doesn't happen very often, to be honest.
Gotcha. Wow. It's because I was having a conversation recently, and there was it kept coming up, and I didn't realize how popular it was, but I guess, not everywhere, but it seems to be something that's becoming more and more popular. Now, and again, going back to, crimes and that kind of stuff, if we have an emancipated minor and they find themselves in a legal predicament, are they then treated automatically as adults because they've been emancipated, or we still factor the fact that they're minors?
It's still a factor that they're a minor, because emancipation basically just gives them, their parents have terminated their legal rights to their kids. Mm-hmm. They're basically saying that this kid is still a kid, it's still a child, but for whatever reason that the court found, now they're independent from their parents. But the juvenile justice system has a totally different set of laws, and it's kind of a different code. In most states, it's a totally different code in the statutes when they're dealing with what would be crimes if you were in adult court, but are called, you're delinquent when you're in juvenile court. So the real problem that's happening, though, with juvenile court is that we're, in my opinion, pushing kids too quickly into the adult system.
Right.
Depending on the type of charge, depending on the kid's age, most kids, because it's hard for me to say that a 16-year-old isn't a kid. I mean,
right.
But most kids by the time they reach 16, if they commit really almost any crime, there is a risk for them to be either waived into adult court or that they just start in adult court. In Wisconsin, depending on the charge, there was big news about the Slenderman cases. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you can be a lot younger and waived into adult court. And the idea that these kids have any idea about what can happen to them in the adult system, even at 16, is ridiculous.
Right.
So I know your question was kind of limited, but for emancipation reasons, it's more for certain things like their decisions to be able to make their own medical decisions, to make their own decisions about school and work.
Right.
It doesn't really eliminate the statutes when it comes to like juvenile delinquency.
Gotcha. Yeah, because it's like I said, when we talk about it, it's a scenario where you just weigh the options. Like, okay, so you want to be grown. That's what my mom would probably say. You want to be grown, huh? So
then you become grown and you don't want to be grown anymore.
Can I be a kid again?
Right.
So, oh yeah. And I mean, Jamie, another issue that raises its head a lot is child custody. The point of view of many people, guys in particular, is that the laws are completely non-favorable to a man. For lack of a better word, unless you can find a picture with a crack pipe in her hand, the judge is always going to rule in her favor and in favor of the mom as being the primary custodian, even if it is obvious that it's not necessarily in the best interest of the child. Now, I'm not saying that's what it is. That's pretty much what the the mindset is of most guys. So you find situations where guys don't even want to go to court to try to fight for custody because they look at it as, okay, I'm just wasting money here, and it's not going to go that way. There's also the theory out there that once a child reaches a certain age, that they can have a say in court as to which parent they'd like to go to. The question is, can a younger child, let's say a preteen or so forth, really have a say in this if it's abundantly clear to them that one situation may be more stable than the other?
Well, in Wisconsin, at the age of, so anyone younger than the age of 12, so 11 and younger, a guardian ad litem is appointed to the case, and they give their opinion as to what the best interest of the child is. So a guardian ad litem has a different role than someone who is representing someone, whether they're representing a kid or representing an adult. That attorney has to represent what that client's wishes are. Whether they agree is a totally different thing.
Right.
But a guardian ad litem, when they get placed on family matters, they can take into consideration what the child says. They definitely can take into consideration to what the parents say. But at the end of the day, they're making their decision based on a lot of factors of what their opinion is the best interest of the child. Obviously, someone who is older and has the ability to share their feelings on things has a better shot of getting something more to what they want. And when it comes to family court matters like that, so realistically, I can understand why people and men feel that way. I've been in court where I'm like, oh Lord, yeah, no, sir, you need someone to talk for you. It's not going well. You need to stop speaking now. I get it, because I agree. I don't even know if it's on purpose, but I think there's still this well, she's the woman, so she raises the children. Even though some women are like, oh my God, I'll take that break,
Right.
But still there's this kind of tendency to go that direction. My advice to the guys that are feeling that way, I mean, if you can't afford an attorney, I understand that would probably help you, because the attorney is going to pick up on the small cues that probably someone who doesn't have to be in front of a judge all the time is just ignoring, because it's emotional. Family court stuff is emotional. So if you can't afford an attorney, the idea that you wouldn't show, then you've just defaulted on everything. The judge is like, oh, well, you didn't even bother to show. Why would we give you, any kind of custody with your children that besides the bare minimum,
Right.
But what's really hard when you do show, or you're interacting with a guardian ad litem, or you're interacting with, the other person's attorney, is that it isn't about you anymore. If it's a family custody situation, if it's a child custody situation, whatever, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on your show, so I won't, but whatever bad stuff that's happening between the two in the relationship doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
What they need to start talking about is, I'm the one who takes her to school every day. I'm the one who goes and makes sure she makes it to practice. I'm the one who, they want to hear, what are you doing as a parent? Forget the other human being that you're not getting along with right now.
Right.
And I think that's what's really hard for everyone to focus on, is that all you want to do is get in court and say how awful that person is. How dare you? But if you focus on what it is that you're doing right as a parent, that is what the judge or whomever, commissioner, and whoever's doing the mediation, that's what they're listening for.
Right. So ultimately, guys, don't give up. Don't give up hope. Don't give up hope. And a lot of times, too, you're absolutely right. Sometimes it's not what you do, it's what your motive is. And a lot of times people are entering into court and fighting these battles because they're ticked off at the other person. Doesn't mean that the other person is not a favorable parent. It's just that I'm trying to stick it to you. So yeah, you're absolutely right about that one. A question that I keep getting texts on, the ones I mentioned, we're going to be having a conversation, was people trying to figure out exactly what. We may have addressed it in some way, shape, or form before, but just for clarity, exactly what the difference is between terming somebody a minor versus terming somebody a juvenile.
I mean, I guess they're pretty much interchangeable. I mean, a minor is anyone who is 17 and younger. And that applies to so many things, whether you're voting. It's beyond just criminal court or beyond the court system. So that's just anyone who's 17 and younger. That means that a court has that jurisdiction over people who haven't reached the age of majority, which in the United States is 18. So that's really kind of a general just age number. And then for juvenile, though, for the most part, when someone is saying, juvenile court or juvenile in juvenile court, it's the subject of the case. So, if it's a juvenile delinquency, they're the subject of whatever the criminal act is. If it's a child protection case, they're the ones that everyone's talking about needs protection, like a CPS case. Mm-hmm. So, to me, the definition of the juvenile is just that it's now become the subject of the action. Whatever court it may be, they're now the subject as opposed to, and they just happen to be minors because now they're under the age of 17.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Not a problem. For those who had that question, there you go. Keep it moving. Keep it grooving. It's Homegrown.
Yeah, I want no one there from a child, I'm a future children. My nieces, nephews, I'm my godchildren. Now all the youths out there, G-Cool, send no one out for them. Joey, Justin, Millie, Marlea, Gavi, Christian, Caden. Yeah, man.
Baby, you can always come home. I'm never too far. You can always come home. My love will follow you wherever you can always come home. I'm never too far. You can always come home. My love will follow you wherever you are. Cause you did not try, don't mean it would not work. I did not cry, don't mean it did not hurt. I'm not the crying type, for what it's worth. Now baby, you're my child, been loving you since birth. You don't know what you mean to me. Don't let it be more painful than it has to be. I'ma give you wings, I'll set you free. I think there's so much things I think you need to see. But if this crazy world starts bringing you down, then don't say your word and don't make a sound. Home is here, so head homeward bound. That's why cars got steerings, baby, turn around. Nothing wrong with taking 2 steps back so you can make 4 forward, get it back on track. That's why I'm here, your daddy's got your back. You can always come home. I'm never too far. You can always come home. My love will follow you wherever you can always come home. I'm never too far. You can always come home. My love will follow you wherever you are. I know you're getting grown, but here is some advice. Before you make one step, you think about it twice. You will make mistakes before you get things right, but there is always day coming after night. And I don't know what is down the road. I know there'll be some laughing and some heavy load. All it takes is patience and a humble mode for you to break these chains and figure out these codes. There's time to work and there's time to play. Make time to rest.
And that one is Come Home from the album Ocherius by G. Cole and the Raps and Kush Band. Lovely record. If you don't have that one, go get that. All right, we're still juvenile. It's, everybody's up in arms, has their questions and so forth, their concerns when it comes to the juveniles. We've been talking about domestic situations, but we also have criminal situations with juvenile offenders. How old does one have to be? Is there an age that one has to be arrested?
No, is the really, really kind of simple answer. And really, every state is different. Mm-hmm. So I practiced in Arizona, and at the time I was practicing there was no, by statute law, an age that was too young for them to be have them enter the juvenile court system.
Right.
In Wisconsin, the age is 9. So it's an arbitrary number, but they chose the number 9. Right. So it really depends on what state. Gotcha. The other half, though, that's really important is the age in which they can be either through a hearing waived to adult court, or just because of the charge and their age, they're automatically placed into adult court. So the ages kind of go from both sides. How young do we want kids to say, we're going to hold you criminally liable for something, and how young are we going to say, okay, well, now we're going to let you into adult court because we really think you've caused some trouble?
I gotcha. So I guess that being said, evidently, it's not just age, and in some cases, not heavily weighed on age as to whether you're tried as a minor or an adult. So
it's definitely the charge.
Right.
So the charge that scares me the most, and again, every state is different, but the charge that scares me the most and actually scares teachers the most are sex assault.
Right.
So the case that I have that breaks my heart the most is that I have a 15-year-old client who is waived into adult court. He's charged with a first-degree sex assault because his girlfriend is 13. And that's it. That's the end of the fact pattern.
Wow.
He is 15, she's 13, and because of her age, it's a first-degree sex assault.
Wow.
So having to explain that to parents, having to explain that to my 15-year-old client, that not only are you facing in the state of Wisconsin a 40-year possible maximum prison sentence, although that's even just because it's possible doesn't mean it happened to him. But you could have to register for the rest of your life as a sex offender. And there's nowhere on the sex offender registry does it say, oh, by the way, you're not the scary one that everyone thinks of. You're just the wrong age.
Right.
But having to explain that to a parent is already hard enough, but having to explain that to a 15-year-old. So whenever I go and I talk in schools, teachers always want me to tell their kids about the sex assault charges, especially when they're in middle school, especially when you're in high school. Because someone who's a sophomore, who's, has their birthdays a little bit later, dating a freshman, that's this category that this kid is in.
Wow.
And he got sentenced to prison for 5 years. And he has to register for the rest of his life for having sex with his girlfriend.
Right.
And that, there are laws, like in Wisconsin, they kind of nicknamed it the Romeo and Juliet law, where you can petition the court and say, court, under these circumstances, we don't think our client should have to register for the rest of their life because they're within 2 years of each other because, X, Y, and Z. But the court didn't find that it should apply to that case. So he has to register for the rest of his life. And so if you Google him, he's going to be listed as a sex offender. But if you talk to him, it's not what everyone thinks that registry is about. It's not the creeper. It's not, you know what I mean? It's a 15-year-old who slept with his 13-year-old girlfriend. That's it.
Wow. But he still can't get certain jobs because he's going to pop up on a School 10 background check.
Right.
So.
And he won't be able to live certain places. And he's going to have to check with the police every time he moves. And those are all felonies if you don't do those things.
Right.
So it's like this vicious circle that this 15-year-old, who's now, he's older, he's 17, he's still in prison though, because he slept with his 13-year-old girlfriend.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's, the law.
Yeah.
The law. Yeah. Sometimes I think about the law, I'm like, who created these things? But it's the law. And I actually, wow. All I can say is wow. Go ahead.
Well, I don't want to interject where you're saying, but okay. So the law that's really behind the times is possession of child pornography. Everyone who thinks about child pornography again thinks about the creeper, 50-year-old man in his basement situation.
Mm-hmm.
But possession of child pornography is also stupid teenagers who text each other their body parts.
All right.
So the person who sends it is now distributing child pornography. And the person who's receiving it is now possessing child pornography.
Wow.
And that, again, has, in Wisconsin, a minimum of 3 years prison. A minimum of 3 years.
Wow.
And then they can go away. Yes. So that's where, again, teachers are always telling me, you need to tell my students this. Because they don't see it, you see, celebrities who are, send pictures of their parts to whomever. And it's just kind of part of the age of having a cell phone, even though I don't, would want people to do that, but okay. But when we expect these teenagers who all have access to their cell phones, and now we're charging them because this is what the law says. but this law hasn't caught up to the technology of cell phones and how teenagers use them.
Right.
And it's not the same, again, as the 50-year-old creeper in their basement.
Okay. Wow. Now I've got to drive the scenic route, not driving through Wisconsin. I'm driving around. So.
Well, but it isn't just Wisconsin, just to let you know, because the definition is anyone who's under the age, right? It's a number. You know, again, it varies per state, but usually it's 16 and younger. You know, a 6-year-old sends pictures of her chest to somebody.
Right.
They've now sent child porn, and that person's received it. So it's not even like it's.
No, it's not a. It's not a Wisconsin thing. It's a.
Right. Exactly.
You know,
we don't want to encourage it, but it's not the same, and there should be an exception to that.
Wow, it's crazy. And the funny thing is, I have an episode coming up where I'm talking to some teenagers, and that is something that, you know, though I use it as just a deterrent, you know, I use it as something that some bad can happen, use it as a deterrent, but it is true. You know, what you deem to be just me being, you know, cheeky, or me being, you know, with my girlfriend or my boyfriend or whatever the case may be, can have dire consequences. You know,
beyond the STDs and birth control and, you know, all those things, it's like, you know, I do know when I was a kid, no one told me when I was in health class.
Wow, I lost you there. I lost you there for a second. Wow. Well, man. I mean, and I know we had actually glanced at it a little bit earlier, but you know, when mentioned about different demographics and so forth, you know, the clients and people being, you know, worried and advising their children what to do or so forth. You know, parents will say, do this, do that if you get stopped by a police. But what would you advise a juvenile to do if and when?
Well, I'm really glad you asked this question, because I've had many an opportunity to scream this at parents and kids because it's so frustrating. So realistically, if your child is either stopped and is being questioned by the police, or what happens a lot more because of the fact of their age, a police officer might call the parent and say, hey, we need to speak to your son. Would you mind bringing him down so that we can speak to him? You know, as a person, when a police officer asks me to do something, so it's like if I get pulled over or whatever, even though I've been a defense attorney for years now, I'm still like, oh my God, I'm so scared. But as that parent, your natural tendency is just to do what the police officer says. You know, or if the officer knocks at your door and asks if you can come in, it's just common decency to say, sure, please come into my home. But as the parent, unfortunately, because you are the parent, you have to say no. Right. You know, if an officer calls and says, you know, we bring Johnny down to the police station so we can speak to him, you have to say no. And if they say, well, if you refuse this or you don't want to, then we're going to issue a warrant for his arrest, then you have to say, and I know it's so hard to say it, well, okay, then go ahead. And then you'll find a lawyer. Right. And you can contact most public defender's office, and whether or not you've already filled out the paperwork, they'll advise you what to do from there. And they'll actually, for the most part, they'll probably call the police department to kind of figure out what's going on. If your child, though, is stopped and you're not there, or what happens, I think, more and more lately is that, you know, they come to the school, so the parent isn't there. Unfortunately, you have to be able to train your child for have them to say, not I want my mom or I want my parent, but I want a lawyer. Because a police officer can speak to your child with or without you. You know, I have a lot of parents who say, well, I talked to him without me. I'm like, yes, they did, because they knew if you were there, it wouldn't go well. But that interview won't stop until your child says, I want a lawyer. Right. And so what I advise young people, it doesn't matter if they're kids or if they're adults, if an officer is, you know, has pulled you over or they've stopped you when you're walking, always be very polite. But if they start asking you more questions than what you would see on a driver's license, like, you know, where do you live and your name and your age and stuff like that, if they start asking you more questions than what you would find on the driver's license, ask them politely, am I under arrest? Make them say yes or no. Because if it's any answer but yes, I'm under arrest, then you are free to leave. And then you politely say, well, if I'm not under arrest, then I'm going to freely leave. If they stop you, you are under arrest. And then you say, I want a lawyer. And you keep saying that until you talk to a lawyer. Most of the time they're going to say, you don't need one. We're just talking. We're just trying to get information. They're investigating you. That's what they do. And if you don't need a lawyer, then you're free to leave. But it's hard to stay calm. It's hard. And that's the other part, is you have to stay calm. And if we're going to talk about, differences in race and how that all goes, we can talk about that too.
Right.
But that really is just that if you're not free to leave, then you're under arrest, and you have to say, and the only thing you have to say or should be saying is, I want a lawyer.
Right. Well, I mean, as far as even the topic of race and stuff like that, it's almost evident. It is what it is. Certain people, minorities or so forth, find themselves being more of a target. And some of it is just, people's thought process, how they were raised, and then now they're police officers. Some people are also not familiar. A lot of people don't realize is that there are certain places in the world or in the country that people grow up that there are not a lot of minorities there. So what they know about a minority is what they see on from the media. And it is painfully evident that the depiction from the media is not necessarily favorable. So some people are, scared. Some people are improperly trained. However the case may be, the unfortunate thing is you will end up on the wrong side of that. So I hearing you say that now, I mean, I guess a lot of people just have to, learn to say that a little bit more. I want a lawyer, And
knowing you're right. Saying I want a lawyer doesn't prevent that officer from arresting you.
Right.
It just prevents it so that your statements aren't used against you. And if you're meeting me, your statements didn't help you get out of that trouble. So there is nothing that you need to share with them. Just remain calm. Because it's really hard once your client has said, oh, sure, I did this, but you really can't go back from that, right?
Right.
But when it comes to police officers, I have high hopes that it's not like, I see a brown person, so I must go up there and do something.
Right.
The big problem is that where they are. If I can go into a black community and see like 3 black cars circling and wondering, there's nothing going on here. Not even for me, just in the community circling.
Right.
And then you go out to a smaller suburb and you don't see an officer for days. Then where do you think the high crime areas are going to be? If the police officers have a constant presence in one neighborhood, but are only out there until someone, calls the police in another neighborhood, the high crime areas are going to be where they're always at.
True.
And that's something that's very frustrating as a defense attorney is you always hear, well, I stopped this person because it's a known, drug neighborhood. And I'm like, but okay, can you point to the areas where you would say is not? But can you just give me, and of course they can't.
Right.
There's no answer to that. Right. But that's where I do think, if we're going to target certain areas and then say, well, they're high crime, that's why we're targeting them, it's because you're always there. It's not because there isn't crime going on in other areas. It's just this is where you are.
Gotcha.
And the neighborhood knows that. They know that that's what's really kind of going on.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And crazy enough, even back to even the whole school and parent situation, I've seen scenarios where a child gets in trouble in school and they're in police custody before their parent get there, citing delinquent conduct. What exactly is delinquent conduct?
Well, and I don't know how old you are, sir, but when I was in school, we had an officer in our school that taught or was a part of the DARE program. I don't really know, but he was there as our friend, right? Mm-hmm. Like he was everyone's friend and high fives and a T-shirt for everybody. And I don't think I ever remember him ever having to arrest anybody. He was there to kind of say, hey, I'm here and I'm hip and I'm cool, whatever.
Right.
But now police officers are in school really for the purpose of being police officers in the school.
Right.
You know, and the problem is that when they get called down to the principal's office, it's not just the principal there. There is a police officer there. And the case law, so when you're trying to defend your client, is that, well, this person's not under arrest because, one, they're in the school and the principal's there. And, you know, it's not considered, they don't have the same rights. Kids don't have the same rights in school.
Right.
So if I was a parent and I get the call from the school saying, you know, your child is in the principal's office right now, the officers, your blah, I would be telling the principal, you know, you are not to talk to my child till I get there. The principal is more likely to listen to the parents because they have different obligations than a police officer. But that has become a ridiculous problem because it's not that I don't remember fights happening in school. It's not like I don't remember the kids who were smoking marijuana on school property. Mm-hmm. It's just that the way that the schools are dealing with them now, instead of just saying you're suspended or whatever, now not only are you, suspended or you're expelled, but now you're going to have a juvenile record because the police officer is right there.
Right.
Schools are also on no tolerance policy. And this is creating a ridiculous amount of kids who are getting expelled from school. So I had a kid who went camping with his family. They took his backpack to put stuff in. The mom forgot to take out this little tiny Swiss Army knife. Like the blade was less than 2 inches, or maybe it was 2 inches.
Right.
And someone saw it in his backpack, reported him, and they tried to expel him from school. Even though the mom was like, I'm really sorry, it was my fault, I didn't clean it, whatever. The idea that this kid who has no record, and he was charged with bringing a weapon on school grounds, so there's that too. But this child who has no problems in school is at risk of being kicked out because he has this little tiny knife that he didn't even know about in there.
Right.
That's just ridiculous. And we're going to tell him, please, you're never allowed to go back to this school district ever again. Good luck with your family finding you another school district.
Wow. Wow.
So, yeah, the police presence, the no tolerance policy that schools have, I mean, I understand why it's happened like that, but there needs to be discretion there, too.
Right.
I do think with a police officer presence, the principal is not in charge when that stuff happens, when some crime happens on school grounds. And then with the no tolerance policy, we're taking a lot of kids out of school, which creates a lot of problems down the road.
Right.
When it comes to crime and poverty and things like that.
Crazy. And I mean, are officers required to show parents evidence or explain to a parent why they are, holding a child for some offense?
No.
No?
No. And they're not required either. I am that attorney who, if I find out my client's in custody, that I will storm the gate. I will go down there and say, I want to see my client. They don't have to let me. My client has to say it. My client has to say, I want my lawyer. The child could say, I want my mom. They could keep repeating that. It won't matter. Mm-hmm. If they're under arrest, they don't have to stop and they don't have to go tell the parents anything. What stops the police officer from speaking to someone is saying, I want a lawyer. Right. And if they say anything else, I know I'm nerdy, so I don't know how newsworthy this was, but there was a gentleman who said, I want a lawyer dog. It was a kid. I can't remember what state it was from. I want a lawyer dog. And some appellate court found that he did not ask for an attorney, that the police officers were reasonable to believe that he was looking for a lawyer dog, a dog who is a lawyer. Yeah.
Wow.
Right. So that's how clear you have to be when you're saying you want a lawyer. There cannot be any kind of gray. And if that person starts to engage the police officer about anything else, that they can interpret that as meaning that they can start questioning them again.
Wow.
So that's why I just stress, whether you're 14 or you're 24 or however old, if you don't keep repeating, I want a lawyer, and then shut your mouth.
Right.
There's a lot of ways that they can get around that. And it's really hard. I mean, I watch interrogation videos a lot. They leave you in that room by yourself for the majority of the time. You're just sitting there waiting and sweating it out.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still, you've got to just remember that there's really nothing you can say to get yourself out of that situation. There's a heck of a lot you can say to make it worse.
Right. When keeping it real goes wrong. So. Oh, man. Wow. Well, I hope everybody's listening to that one. Don't move, don't dance, don't say a word. Don't say a word. Now, Jamie, a question that seems to come up a lot too, especially amongst professionals and social workers and stuff like that, is that of mental health. The research shows that there's not much mental health support for juveniles that are in the justice system. Do you find that to be true?
Yes. I will always say that there just isn't enough resources at any age that really has the finance to be able to properly address mental health issues. Even in general. Juvenile court, the whole goal is to try to rehabilitate and give treatment. That is really the goal of juvenile court. That is supposed to be the line between a juvenile court and an adult court. But it's also have to have money to be able to do that. You have to have the services. You have to have the facilities to be able to do that. And it's always lacking. I hope that I'm young enough to be able to see that this justice system, whether it's juvenile or adult, starts to realize that at least 70, and I'm probably low, at least 70% of my clients, but for some kind of mental illness or substance abuse issue, I probably would never have met that.
Right.
And locking them up or, putting them in a detention center, putting them in jail, putting them in prison, although temporarily, I guess, gets them out of the community, so I guess, quote, the community is safe for that time, that doesn't really give them the tools and what they need to be able to come back out into that community and survive.
Right.
Because now not only have you taken away their house, their job, and now you've made it more difficult for them to get a house and a job, but you're saying, good luck, you have nothing, now make it. Again,
right.
Like for most of my clients, it's an again situation. And there just isn't enough resources to make sure that if someone is diagnosed with any kind of mental illness that requires medication, there's not enough resources, one, to make sure that they're even eligible for those services. But then on top of that, if they have no one else to rely on to make sure that they're staying up to date and they're taking their meds as prescribed and they're visiting their doctors as needed, then we're just really kind of setting this all up to happen again.
Right.
And I do really wish that the justice system would throw more of its resource into the mental health side as opposed to building another prison. I think that the money would be used a little bit better and have a better chance of not having so many people come back.
Gotcha. So I guess with that being said, it's safe to say that in your professional opinion, that the rise in some of these juvenile crimes can be attributed to mental health issues.
Oh, yeah. And, there's tons of studies that show that a juvenile brain isn't fully developed. And the part of the brain that is not developed is the part that keeps impulse control in check. So a kid, if you're asking them, didn't you think about this, John, before you stole someone's car? No.
And they're
they
being
saw
honest.
A shiny car, they just want the car. But sure, let's charge him with a felony, car theft. Sure, let's do that. And not address the fact that he is 15 years old trying to impress some chick over there, and that's all he cares about. Not the car, not the person who owns the car. They care about just impressing this chick over here. So that's not even a mental health issue. That's just brain development. And for boys like yourself, it takes longer.
Wow.
They're into their mid-20s before their brain is fully developed. Females are supposed to happen a little bit faster, but there's so many studies on that. And I do bring that up in court when I think that it shows why something may have occurred.
Yeah. Tell them hot chicks have been a problem since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right. Well, hopefully none of my nephews come and tell me that it's because of the hot chick while I did it. And then again, I might be like, I see what you're saying. Okay, I get it. But you never know. Oh, my Lord. And I know you're not a psychologist, but do you find that when you have a juvenile client locked up with adults as they await trial, that the child then learns to become more criminal and hardened, and that in itself makes it more difficult for you to prove this kid's innocence or prove that they're actually a juvenile, because they've spent a little bit of time there, hardened, toughened up, and they don't present then in court as the person that they were when said offense was committed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the few kids, not even a few anymore, but the kids that I've had who have, because of their charge, have transferred from the juvenile detention center to the adult jail side, there's a difference in attitude. When I talk to a kid in the juvenile detention center, they're more willing to open up about how scared they are, how nervous they are. They want to see their mom, right? Mm-hmm. When I go and I see the same child, because I have tons of kids who have had them make that leap over to the other side. When I see them on the adult side, there's this stoic side to them that wasn't there, and I'm not kidding, less than a week before.
Wow. Because
now they're on the grown man side. We're not allowed to show that they're scared, that they're angry, that there's any emotion whatsoever. Everyone has to be just fine, because that's the way you survive in there. Right. And I tell the parents that, it is a really, really scary thing. And you can only scare a kid once about what the adult jail is going to be like. Once they've been there before, or once they're there, it's not as scary anymore. Before they get there, you can scare them and say, you don't want to be there. Right. But once you're there, even though they still don't want to be there, it's not like the unknown anymore. They're also, they're listening to gentlemen who, for whatever reason, have been there a lot. Mm-hmm. And I always make the joke, and I'm not joking, but I am, just to try to get them to understand. I'm like, if you want to listen to them, that's your choice. But I think they probably make bad decisions, and that's why we're all here today. Just so they understand. But I think, I think what's hard is, one, being a female attorney. Mm-hmm. Most of my clients, I apparently have now just chosen that this is what I want. Most of my clients are young black males. Mm-hmm. Having to convince them that I know what they're going through, they'll never be able to do that. The guys that are in their pods are. Right. And so here I am telling them, you have to trust me. Please believe me. I am fighting for you. But I may not look like you. I may not have ever been in custody, but this is what I do. That sometimes is a hard hurdle to get over. Eventually, most of my clients see that, but they're going to trust the people that they're with all the time. That does make a difference. That these are the older guys that are there, that they're sitting around with all day. Right. And that it is a sad situation. They do try, especially within the prison system, to kind of change so that there's a minimum and maximum security. There are prisons that are set up for younger people. So they do try to separate that, because I do think that they believe that there's a difference, but it has such a big impact. Once a young person goes to prison, they don't come back the same. There's an institutional, there's a sense of this is just what their life is going to be. It feels like they've lost that hope that they will never have to go there again. So it is a very sad situation.
Wow. Sad indeed.
Yeah.
Sad indeed. All right, we'll be right back with Jamie. Keep it moving, keep it grooving. It's Homegrown.
Ooh, confident in you, Jaja, know you not gonna make me suffer. Enemies trying them up it, scatter and batter and flatter. Protect my people, Jah. No let them get caught in the crossfire. Protect my nation, Jaja. Cause we no want me no land to no slaughter. Protect my people, Jah. A Babylon start this wildfire. Protect my nation, Jaja. Protect my nation, Jaja. Downtown and up playground, you know. Holy potential trouble surround. Marcus prophesy, head I go roll. Me wonder if prophecy I go unfold. Uptown, can't go downtown, you know. All country people worried, you know. With means of survival blurred. Worried in a middle section, well I'm sorry. Father help me, some nana have mercy. Father help me, preserve Jamaica beauty. I want you protect my people, Jah. No make them get caught in the crossfire. Protect my nation, Jah. Hey, protect my people, Jah. Hey, look at the youth them, watch them. Can be have a system to trap them. The police and the thugs are your children. Are you alone and authority to judge them? Could I go suffer for bad? The place I go mad. Don't make it get bad like over Baghdad. When politics fail and religion fail, the most I alone will. Protect your people, Jah. Now make them get caught in the crossfire. Protect my people, Jah. Cause we no want me no land to no slaughter. Protect your people, Jah. A Babylon start this wildfire. Protect your people, Jah, 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 Jah. Jah, Jah. I tell your town.
And that one is Taurus Riley with a tune called Wildfire on the Major Rhythm, Don Carleone Productions. Big tune. Now, when it comes to criminal history, a child's criminal history, does a child's criminal history follow them into adulthood and, you know, thus affecting them finding employment? Or
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Oh man. As simple as that. Yep.
Because it's so frustrating. It really is. So most of the time, when you fill out like a job application can't ask whether or not you've ever been found delinquent of a juvenile charge. Mm-hmm. Because it's not considered to be a conviction. So when you look at a job application, it always asks, have you ever had any convictions? So that's all it's out for. But if you want federal aid, they can ask you whether or not you have a juvenile record. It can impact your ability to get federal aid, even something as simple as possession of marijuana.
Right.
That can prevent you from getting federal aid. The other thing is that, like I was talking with you before, even if employer or military or whomever else may not be able to see the court record that specifically say you have a juvenile record, the police reports are not confidential. Those are still public records.
Right.
Again, Google is a public record. You know, so that's what's getting to be a little bit harder. Is that even though an application, whether it's for college, whether it's for military, whether it's for a job, they can never ask you whether or not you've had a juvenile delinquency or conviction.
Right.
It's still that they can still see it. There's places that they can still see it. You can ask to have your juvenile record expunged. Mm-hmm. But again, the same thing applies, where just because the court no longer has a record of your juvenile delinquency doesn't mean that people can't see it.
Right. Wow. I guess even for those, employers and so forth, because I know a lot of states, and successfully so, have lobbied to get employers to remove the that whole ban the box situation, remove that box from the job applications asking about, have you been arrested of a crime or so forth, or felony or whatnot. And I see why. I definitely see why. But on the flip side, is it okay to take the right away from the employer to know who they're hiring?
I guess I kind of do this a little bit different. I mean, if the person is getting into retail and you see a lot of retail theft, as an employer, I do think they probably should have the right to be able to say, listen, you seem to have problems with this. But again, it's where I also see it, though, is like, with substance abuse. Are we going to say that this person is an evil human being because they have a substance abuse problem, and so we never want you to work again? I think that there has to be, and that's why sometimes I help my clients when they're filling out those applications where it says, please explain. For whatever reason, I don't know why my clients, they don't want to, when I fought for them, so they should know what the argument is.
Right.
But when when I've told them, I'm like, listen, you need to just tell them that this was like marijuana, marijuana was found in your boyfriend's car and you were in the car with him. Like, you need to spell that out so that it's not I had all this marijuana and I'm selling it and I'm giving it out to everybody. There's a difference there. So I think that employers should be able to know when it comes to crimes of where it's a trust situation. Stealing is dishonest.
Right.
And as an employer, I don't think you should have to worry about whether or not your employees have a history of stealing. If there's a really violent offense, if you're in the nursing field, of course you don't want someone like that. But it's hard with these possession cases because if they've done the work to get clean, to try to, be healthy, the idea that because they have a possession of marijuana or possession, and that one's come up a lot lately, the possession of marijuana has prevented people from getting jobs. And, in some states, it's not even a crime anymore.
Right.
That's the important one where I just think we have to kind of think about what we want as a society. Are we saying that they just have no redeemable qualities? Please don't hire them.
Right.
So I think it should depend on the type of crime.
Gotcha. And a lot of these questions that we're looking at, too, are still, stemming from what happened as a juvenile, coming back to haunt, as an adult. Now, when it comes to the ramifications of one's actions, stepping away from criminal punishment for a second, can juvenile offenses subject their parents to civil liabilities?
Yes. Because kids don't have money.
Man.
So if I gave the example of the kid stealing a car, and then the car just explodes on impact, or they don't get the car back, or whatever. Yeah, the parents could owe that person restitution because kids just don't have money. Will that person ever see that money? Restitution is a totally different thing, but they can most definitely come after the parents if it's a civil situation. The person can sue them civilly if they wanted to. Right. But a lot of times the juvenile court system puts an order in saying that person is ordered to pay restitution, and the parents they can still be on the hook for that.
Gotcha. Now, the other thing I was wondering about is you find that when adults get arrested, and this goes right back to that original question about, staying too long there and becoming a criminal, a stoic person. When adults get arrested, they can be sitting in jail for a while as they await, be it trial or a bond hearing or whatever the case may be. Is there a time frame that, like a maximum time frame set to where if it's a juvenile, they can only be there for so long as they await either trial or a bond hearing?
So at least again in Wisconsin, and I think it's probably the same for most states, juveniles don't get a bond, so that there isn't a cash amount or, a signature bond or anything, a PR bond. There isn't an amount that a kid could pay to get out of custody. It really is up to the judge to make that determination as to whether or not they'll be released or if they'll be staying in the detention center. There are statutes, though, for the most part, where there are time limits that can expire in which the case has to proceed. So in juvenile court, they do appreciate the fact that it needs to go faster. Having a kid just waiting there in the detention center for their case to resolve is not in any way the purpose of juvenile court. So they do make accommodations. The timelines are a lot shorter, as opposed to adult court, where there are people who have been waiting for years. They haven't been found guilty of anything, waiting for years because they either can't afford the bond or, for whatever reason, they haven't been able to get out and their case hasn't been resolved. But there are exceptions. I mean, sometimes something didn't happen and it needs, both sides might need more time. But for the most part, courts are very accommodating to the fact of we don't want kids just sitting in here waiting for their cases to resolve.
Gotcha. I'm glad because that could be dangerous.
Yeah. And it's not serving anyone's purpose at that point.
Yeah, that is true. Except the owner of the jail. Maybe I should start no, let me stop that. Gotta invest. I'll tell you this, Jamie. I have had conversations with corporate attorneys before, and it wasn't fun. It wasn't. I don't know if you've ever sat down and talked to a corporate attorney before. It's just not fun. But I had a blast talking to you. So
I could go on forever, just letting you know.
Well, we should get together again. I mean, there are tons of stuff that we can. I just, it's just in the essence of time. So I definitely want to, on behalf of the Homegrown family out there, myself, my entire team, just want to thank you so much for joining us and just being so generous with your time. I know also that there are going to be many questions the masses may have. If someone out there wanted to reach out to you for legal services, legal representation, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, the easiest and most likely way I would respond is probably by email.
Gotcha.
Just because I hate phone calls and I never return voicemail. So I can give my email. Otherwise, too, I'm pretty easy to find on Facebook.
Okay.
So my law office is McClendon Law LLC. So if you would search that in Facebook, people can leave me comments on there. Otherwise, I can give my email address as well.
Okay, definitely. Go ahead.
So my email address is attyjamie.mcclendon@gmail.com. So it's just attorney Jamie McClendon @gmail.com.
Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to also make sure that we put the info in the show notes so that they can actually read it and reach out. Because like I said, people are scared of the police, but sometimes they're scared of attorneys too. So Jamie's human. Jamie's human and she's cool to talk to. So I'm going to post the information so that they can definitely reach out to you.
I would appreciate that, and I would love questions.
All right, cool beans. Well, like I said, thank you so very much, and I'm sure we'll have to do this another time. Because there's, like I said, there's endless questions out there, and I'm sure I'm gonna get a bunch of tweets, a bunch of messages, and so forth. You should have asked this. It's not. I don't have forever.
I would love to do this again. So I appreciate your time too.
Thank you so much. So we'll get together. All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
Chatty, Mount Amasi, mix up. Why you no leave people business? I said, down people business. Good God, I tell you about.
Nah, sin near gap, nose in nearby your place one fix up. Why you no allow people business? Leave people business alone. Leave people business alone. Oh God.
And I say one time people them used to say one sweet nanny goat and go run in belly. So when we touching at the street, nobody see we. Country feel with things and I tell people say you give it.
Ooh, them can't look in on my face again. When one police come running on my place again. So right I know me as a good score. Who know do it already now go make no do it no more, mister.
And there you have it. Thank you so much for tuning in. It has indeed been a pleasure. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast Homegrown with G. Cole, available now on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. If you find the information helpful, please share with your friends and loved ones. Remember, be safe, be kind, and be good to each other. My name is G. Cole, and this is Homegrown.
Nakikinika sa música Homegrown with G. Cole.
Estás escuchando Homegrown con G. Cole.
您现在正在收听的是 Homegrown with G. Cole.
You're listening to Homegrown with G. Cole.
Remember, all the music played here on the Homegrown podcast is available on iTunes and all your digital retailers. Please support the artists.